Robin's Joyful Life Saturday, December 21st at 12 noon in the living room at Faithful Central Bible Church, 400 West Florence Avenue in Inglewood. KBLA Talk 1580 extends sincere condolences to the Ayers family. Robin will always be in our hearts.
I never told you all I wanted to say. Sunsets and the ghettos play. Long nights on a hot summer's block where you sip your brew and never touch your glass. This is for eyes that cry like yours and learn to smile again. Rise above the pain. This is for
Welcome to the Black Pack. You are listening to KBLA Talk 1580. I am your host, Adrianne Shropshire, and wow, we are just winding down the year here, Andy. I feel like it is a mad dash to escape from 2024. Even though we know that 2025 is going to be equally, if not more challenging, but I feel like we are experiencing loss at the end of this year, and so it makes it feel more urgent to get to a place where we can just stop and assess, take stock of what has happened over the last year or more. We'll be celebrating the life of our colleague, Robin Ayers, next week. We also lost a great pioneer in Nikki Giovanni this week, and we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit later in the show. But it's Friday. And so, you know, for folks who Friday ends their week, and that may not be many folks, it is at least a day to say, okay, I can stop for a minute. So I appreciate you all joining us here. Someone else who is trying to wind down their year is the President of the United States. So Joe Biden is really trying to, and his administration are really trying to focus on defining and securing his legacy here in these final weeks, really, of his presidency. So this week, the White House launched a new webpage that tries to lay out Biden's impact on the economy, including the fact that there has been a manufacturing boom, or manufacturing jobs boom in the U.S., with 1.6 million jobs created in the private manufacturing industry, spurred by about $1 trillion of investment in the industry under the Biden-Harris administration. 16 million jobs created overall during his term, lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, a record 20 million new business applications, incomes up by more than $4,000 per household, costs down for families. Now, this is obviously, you know, one of the real challenges, sticking points, issues within the campaign this year was that clearly conveying the success of their economic policies proved to be a real challenge, both for President Biden and for Vice President Harris in their campaigns. And as we talked about many times here, even up until Election Day, many voters continued to say that they didn't know what the administration had done to improve the economy. They weren't aware, right, of the policies. And as a result, many continued to say that the economy was either not getting any better or even getting worse even though, and this is always a really sticky point, right? Folks said that the economy was getting worse, or at least not getting any better for them, even though they said that their personal economic situation was stable or getting better. So they saw the overall economy as getting bad, but their own personal situations as not necessarily getting bad. So there remains this huge gap, right, between people's personal economic reality and the perception, right, of how the economy is doing. And that gap between perception and reality suddenly shifted recently. So in Gallup's latest post-election poll, a poll that they did at the end of November, they showed that fewer Americans, actually at the end of November, fewer Americans list the economy as their top issue. And more Americans say they are more confident in the U.S. economy. So what happened? So a month ago, people said the economy was their number one issue. Things were terrible. The economy was in the tank. And now they say, actually, it's not that bad. Well, what changed is nothing, really, except for there are no more misleading campaign ads showing up in people's social media feeds every day and on their television saying that the economy is getting bad. Media outlets aren't running countless hours of talking heads yelling about inflation and costs. Unsurprisingly, these numbers of people who now, think that the economy is not so bad, is being driven by Republicans who now say that the economy is fine. There's no problem. No problem with the economy. The economy is fine. Even though Joe Biden is still president and was president before. But this is, again, this gap that exists, right, between fact and perception, and especially when people are bombarded with bad news every day, and whether that news is misleading or it's misinformation or disinformation or whatever it is that we want to call it, it shapes what people think is happening around them, even when their own personal economic situation is okay. They believe that the thing that's happening is bad, and so we're seeing that play out right now. Economy was terrible for a bunch of people. Now it's not really, it's such a big deal. It is this perception between reality and fact. So, for example, when we ignore, right, that crime is actually going down, right, that there are actual statistics and numbers that demonstrate to us that crime is going down, right? When we allow the loudest voices to misinform us, we get ineffective, tough on crime policies like Prop 36 here in California. Right. When we don't tell the truth about the economy or the economic successes of the Joe Biden administration, we get a president-elect, Donald Trump, who now says that he probably can't deliver on bringing down the cost of groceries, right? Because he said it's hard. Right. Now, this is a man who a month ago was saying that Joe Biden couldn't do it, but Trump alone would bring down the cost of eggs in this country. And now that he's been elected, he says, actually, it's kind of hard to bring down costs, and not so sure that I can deliver on that. But thanks for making me president. And when I told you that I would be able to do it. So we have to be careful. And we've talked about this before about what kind of information we consume, how much we let misinformation drive our perceptions of what's happening, because there are real implications for that. And so when we come forward, we're going to talk a little bit about something similar. I mean, one of the things that obviously when we talked about costs on this show, and of course we heard, from voters as we were talking to them around the country about the idea of costs, oftentimes that was also connected to another important issue for people, and that is healthcare. And so we know we've been hearing a lot about healthcare and healthcare insurance companies in the news, over the last couple of weeks, and for reasons. When we come forward, we're going to be joined by Malaika Jabali, a journalist and author of the book, It's Not You, It's Capitalism. So stay with us. We have a lot to talk about on this issue. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
Somebody bring out the confetti, baby!
Starting Monday, January 6th, KBLA Talk 1580 has a new midday lineup.
I'm excited.
Are you ready for Tavis Smiley, Dr. Cornel West, Jesse Jackson Jr., D.L. Hughley, and E. Quarterly Corte back-to-back?
Oh, my God.
Are you really ready for all this smoke?
I'm ready, brother.
Yes, we still have Dominique DePrima in the mornings and Zoe Williams in the evenings, but middays just got lit on KBLA Talk 1580.
We on fire.
All across America, people are talking about our new midday lineup starting Monday, Monday, January 6th, our KBLA 1580 app downloads are on fire because everybody's going to be tuning in.
Yes, I love you guys. You are the bomb.
Now would be a good time to hit up SMB at KBLA1580.com if you want folks to hear about your business or brand. That's SMB at KBLA1580.com. It's going up in 2025 on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's going up.
That's what I want.
You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580, where climate is king. Climate is king.
Hey, Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about some new COVID information I saw online.
Uh-huh.
I read that 3 out of 4 adults in the United States have a high risk factor for severe COVID-19. And Black folks like us with certain conditions like diabetes, heart disease, mental health conditions, or being 50 and older are at high risk.
Boy, you sound like a commercial.
I'm just saying. I know you love your ginger teas and essential oils, but remember, there are treatment options for COVID-19.
I promise if I get sick again, I'll call my doctor to ask about my options.
1 in 3 children born today will get diabetes. This sad prediction by the Centers for Disease Control will come true if millions of Americans don't improve their lifestyles, especially by changing what they eat, how much they eat, and how active they are every day. Every 23 seconds, another American gets diabetes. Stop diabetes before it starts. To learn more, contact the American Diabetes Association or download our free diabetes education programs at learningaboutdiabetes.org.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
You don't talk to me like that. Don't talk to your mommy like that.
Unlike your mama, we can handle your black talk on the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire.
You are listening to the Black Pack here on KBLA Talk 1580. I am your host, Adrianne Shropshire. And over the last week, we have seen an outpouring of stories about people's struggles with the U.S. healthcare system and major insurance companies. And while a lot of this is not new, this dissatisfaction, people being frustrated with the healthcare industry, a lot of this isn't new. It has sort of renewed this discussion, right, after last week's fatal shooting of the United Healthcare CEO. It's renewed this discussion that is, sort of people lifting up their stories about their challenges, their frustration with their insurance company, with the our healthcare system in general. And so we wanted to talk about this a little bit. And so joining us to sort of help us get into this conversation about the healthcare industry is Malaika Jabali, a journalist and author of the book "It's Not You, It's Capitalism: Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On." Malaika, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there, Adrianne. It's so good to join you.
Okay, so we have seen in the aftermath of the United Healthcare CEO shooting, we have seen, in addition to sort of all of everything that's on social media, everything that we're seeing across the internet, we've seen people really lift up their stories, right, front and center. And so I know, just like scrolling through, or people send me, texts or, stories that they're seeing about people, sharing their experience having claims denied, the challenges that they've had with various healthcare insurance companies. What do you make of this moment where all of these stories are suddenly coming front and center with, tons and tons of support for those people who are sharing the stories?
Yeah, I think it taps into a lot of the anger and frustration that people have had as long as we have had this insurance-based model and we've normalized it. I think even when you think about the excitement dating back to Barack Obama's campaign, his first campaign in 2008, he was so widely popular and people celebrated so much in the streets when he won because he had this progressive platform on universal health care. I mean, which is how we ended up with ACA. Mm-hmm. But before that, it was about having this public policy to have a nonprofit, a healthcare system that was not based on the for-profit health insurance model. So the reason why people were excited about him was because that was like the center of his campaign. Some of the listeners may not be old enough to remember that, but I was there. Or even the excitement around Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 because he was talking about Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. And in so many jurisdictions all over the country, it almost didn't matter what ideology you had, you believe that there needed to be at least a minimal amount of change to the health insurance model. But they have had so much power, so much lobbying strength to keep it where it is. And we're seeing the frustration that has boiled over from everyday Americans right now.
Yeah, I think that is, thank you for that. Not even, long historical context, right? But recent history, right? Yeah. Of people feeling very, very hopeful, right? About being able to have a healthcare system that didn't feel predatory. And we, I think ProPublica, I think this week has done some deep reporting on the healthcare industry, particularly around United Healthcare's billing practices and approach to denying claims, which has really sort of been a focal point, right, for some of the frustration that people are talking about. This week, even reporting that United Healthcare strategically limited access to what the outlet called critical treatment for kids with autism. So what do you make of this sort of, kind of gaming the system that is allegedly about providing care when people need it, but instead is both I talked about perception and reality at the beginning of the show, sort of both in perception and in reality is sort of reducing, shrinking, limiting the kinds of care that people get when they really need it?
Well, to zoom out, this is an effect of an industry that is capitalist, that is allowed to grow, that has limited regulations under a capitalist system. So our government allows this to happen. The industry makes sure that because their job is to meet the demands of shareholders, we can remember United Healthcare Group CEO, I believe it was a shareholders meeting. So this is a for-profit system. So this is what happens when you take a fundamental right, something that every industrial country has. Mm-hmm. They've got some kind of nonprofit or public model for health insurance. They recognize that this is a public right that everybody should have without breaking the bank. But in the United States, we are so exceptional and unique and great that we decided to have a for-profit model. And so when you have a for-profit industry, it is their legal duty, it's a fiduciary duty to maximize profits for shareholders. So how do you do that? You take all the money, this is not some conspiracy, it's corporate law. Right. So you take all of this money, and in order to keep that money, you're not going to want to, you make it harder to pay out claims. Right. And we can get into the history of how we even got this insurance model, and on top of that, how we fail to have a public model, which has a long history.
Well, let's do that, Malika. Let's do that. Yeah. Let's do that. Let's get into that, because I think that it is, oftentimes people just experience the frustration, but don't actually understand how we got here, right? Like, why do we have this system?
Well, we have been talking. So I was doing research for my book, It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On, where I was looking at key industries that I just hear everyday people as a journalist, the things that I hear people talk about through my political reporting that they complain about. Mm-hmm. We need adequate housing. We need adequate education. Healthcare is usually one of those top three in the list. So I wanted to know, how do we get this uniquely American system? And I was shocked to see that we have been talking about this for over a century. Right. So Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 proposed a national health plan with the Progressive Party. Mm-hmm. Even back then, you had elite business interests that said, well, this is going to cut into having a for-profit model. This is going to cut into our profits. So that ended up being tabled. And then a couple of decades later, you had Harry Truman in the 1950s, and not a couple, but about 3 decades later, right. 3 or 4 decades. Harry Truman came up with a plan. But around this time, we got to think about the context. This is during segregation.
Right.
This is when you start hearing more about desegregation and people saying, we got to start desegregating hospitals. You've got Black folks in the South Black people everywhere who are struggling. But, a lot of Black Southerners in particular, with his being in low-wage work with agriculture and all that, they don't have enough hospital resources. So people start talking about desegregating hospitals. But the eugenics movement has infiltrated so many Southern legislators where this is the most incredible part, almost incredulous. It was hard to believe. They did not want to approve of Truman's plan because they understood that keeping Black people alive, or at least according to eugenicists, racist minds, that they could not keep Black people healthy because to them, that would be a threat to the white race. Literally,
wow.
The president of the American Medical Association, the chapter in North Carolina, which was influential with Southern legislators, he had a presidential speech where he argued that having a national plan, having any kind of health reform would keep Black people alive. And because we were an inferior race, we just needed to die out and not threaten the white population and infiltrate white blood. Like this is the base of what we're dealing with.
Well,
here.
And it's like so much of everything else in this country in terms of our systems, our institutions that it have their core root in racism and racist policy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I mean, then when you combine that with, over the last, even after that, with the Cold War, I call it the 2 R's. It was racism and red baiting. And so the red baiting, you can't go out and say Black people are inferior, so we can't have equal health care. But now it's, we can't have socialized medicine. Socialized medicine is too much like communist countries. Do you really want us to, no longer have our freedom and to be Americans and to have choice? And elected officials and the segregated medical industry led by white professionals, they all use that language. Ronald Reagan was hired by the American Medical Association when he was an actor to fearmonger around Harry Truman's plan or other national plans that came after it. I believe it might have been Medicare, actually, that was proposed around this time. Mm-hmm. They hired him to use that same kind of language about socialized medicine threatening the American way of life. So all of these things combined together has helped normalize a language that we even use today around healthcare, that it deprives us of choice, and it's going to be a dictatorship and all this other rhetoric.
Right. And so it reminds me of, because even still to this day, we're still talking about using the Cold War language of can't have socialized medicine and this is socialism or this is communism still right now, right? Having that conversation. And it also strikes me when you just think about the anti-Blackness and how anti-Blackness plays a role, or, the sort of, the beginnings of the establishing of the healthcare system that we currently have. It also reminds me of, you talked about the ACA, the American, all I can think of is Obamacare. But
yeah.
It's like, what does ACA mean?
Right.
But when Obama was first putting together his plan, and the sort of reaction to that from mostly from white segments of our country, when people would literally say, I will die before I would support this plan that this man is putting forward, right? Largely because it was coming from him, right? But just sort of ties into both the kind of anti-Blackness of how we got here, and then also the sort of the other piece around, continuing to use Cold War language and the association with anything that might be a social good, right, as being bad, and therefore America there should not have it or should not adopt it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we are seeing. Let me just. I want to before I ask you this next question. I just want to make sure if there's anything else that we should understand historically, because I think that was great and just helpful for listeners to understand, how we got to this place. Anything else on that before I sort of take us into a different direction?
No, we can go in another direction. Yeah, that is, just we've had this 100-year period, over 100-year period, where we have, I think, distracted the working class, who are largely the ones who are going to be underinsured, and so America's racism, America's, even its foreign policy, its larger, goals to be a global power, so that it doesn't even seem, like we're doing anything remotely similar to, socialist countries or communist countries, that has an effect on everybody. So even, the poor white people who might be Republican and they don't want to see Medicare expansion, a lot of them don't realize like how much it is impacting their lives. And so I really do look forward to seeing when there is more mass mobilization around how we can actually change things.
Yeah, and I think that's also a really good point about people who struggled against or sort of rejected the expansion as it's been talked about over the last few years. And then, when folks have gotten expansion in their states, how much has benefited them, right? How important it ends up being for them. And so in some ways, I also just think that that's also the as we know with many things, right? Once you give someone a benefit, it's pretty hard to take it away. Right. People do not want their once they. I mean, I think that's also with Obamacare, the idea that it simply can just be legislated away, or even litigated away. I think it's a bigger fight which is partly why the Republican Party sort of walked away from it. So lots more to talk about here. I have more questions for you, including sort of getting at this, the fact that we are seeing in some places states making an effort to erase people's medical debt and sort of what the implications of that. But more on this with Malika Jabali when we come forward.
More of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Daniel Penny, acquitted in the NYC deadly chokehold case, will join Vice President-elect Vance at Saturday's Army-Navy game. Penny was found not guilty of negligent homicide in a black man, Jordan Neely's death. Black New York City Mayor Eric Adams met with incoming White House border czar Tom Homan to address the migrant crisis. They agreed the city cannot be a haven for criminal immigrants. Adams, critical of Biden's immigration policy, looks forward to working with the Trump administration on the issue. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been admitted to the hospital. The 84-year-old California Democrat sustained an unknown injury while in Europe. Pelosi was traveling with a bipartisan congressional delegation to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. And Time magazine has named Glorilla's TGIF as its best song of 2024. The 25-year-old Tennessee native beat out popular artists like Kendrick Lamar and Beyonce. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
On the 105 eastbound just before Lakewood Boulevard, a big rig and a pickup truck tangled. This accident clearing off the right shoulder. Coming back from the airport, though, 105 east is slow from the 405 to Lakewood Boulevard. If you're on the South 605 just before Carson Street, a large wooden beam fell into one of the middle lanes of the roadway. 57 southbound right at the 60 is a solo crash on the right shoulder. Up ahead, 57 southbound, a slow ride from Pathfinder Road to the Orange Crush.
Pro Paint Days are back at Lowe's. Get your choice of 5-gallon pails of Valspar Signature Ceiling Paint or HGTV Home by Sherwin-Williams Flat Ceiling Paint for just $148. Lowe's knows paint. Lowe's knows pros. Valid through 12/20.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Black College Football National Championship will be decided tomorrow. It's the Celebration Bowl. Jackson State and South Carolina State will meet up in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, home of the NFL Atlanta Falcons. Jackson State is 11-2, South Carolina State 9-2. A crowd of 41,000 showed up for last year's HBCU title game between Florida A&M and Howard. Another large crowd is expected tomorrow. The Celebration Bowl is supported by several major sponsors, including Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, Cricket, and Georgia Power Company. Organizers of this HBCU showcase have the resources they need to put on a quality event. Jackson State rolled into Atlanta with a 9-game winning streak. South Carolina State has the HBCU National Player of the Year in quarterback Eric Phoenix. You can catch the Celebration Bowl live on ABC and ESPN, 9 a.m. kickoff Pacific time. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, y'all, come on. Here come the drums.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey.
I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, you know, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chuck D. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it! Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power! Fight the power!
This season, Chevy brings classic pairings, cookies and milk, mistletoe and kisses, and your holiday plans and a new Chevy. Silverado 1500 gives you power and capability with 430 pound-feet of torque to haul your holiday tree. Equinox EV and the all-new Equinox offer award-winning quality and style to see you through the holiday season. See why Chevy makes everything better and brighter. Chevrolet, together let's drive.
With reported hate crimes rising in recent years, California has responded through outreach efforts across state government and in collaboration with community-based organizations for the launch of CA versus Hate. This non-emergency, multilingual hate crime and incident reporting hotline provides an anonymous reporting option for victims and witnesses of hate acts reported in 15 different languages through the online portal and in over 200 languages when calling the hotline. Report anonymously by calling 833-866-4283. Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or online at any time at cavshate.org.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the Black Pack, and we are joined with journalist and author Malaika Jabali. So when we were finishing off the last part of our conversation, I raised the question about debt, which is, I feel like you said earlier, we've been having this conversation for 100 years, right? And so we look all the way back to Teddy Kennedy and or Theodore Roosevelt, and the Progressive Party, we know that debt is a huge part of what, is a part of the problem here, right? And that we know that a lot of Americans go bankrupt because they have medical debt. It's estimated that 20 million Americans, I think, have some form of medical debt. We know that Black people are 50% more likely to hold medical debt than their white counterparts. But so how do we break that cycle? Because it seems like this is not. There's also something inherent in here that really is about the racial wealth gap, right? That is feels like it's a part. And again, this sort of gets back to like just the anti-Blackness and all of it, right? But how do we break that cycle of this sort of growing debt that weighs on people?
Yeah, I mean, and just to zoom out a little bit, we're seeing this because even for, I would say, all Americans, health costs have grown substantially. So one of the things that I write in the book is that in 1970, accounting for inflation, health costs were about $1,900. Mm-hmm. Now it is almost $12,000 per capita.
Wow, yeah.
So those costs that insurance companies, providers are saying, that they need to have, don't get passed down to us. So even if we take it back to just what America has had, it didn't always have to be this expensive. Mm-hmm. But because companies are looking for more and more ways to have market share, to be more and more competitive, they're charging for a lot of things. I mean, sometimes you look at your bill and you're like, why? Right. Why did it cost me $9,000 to get my temperature checked? It's like You guys are padding. So there are, I guess, different ways of addressing it. There are individual things that we can do, but fundamentally, obviously, these have to be systemically resolved. And then there are individual things that we can do to move toward the system changing. For one, when we look at candidates who are actually talking about Medicare for all, we didn't have that in the presidential race this year. Right. We barely got a conversation about any kind of, I would say, mass health care. Kamala Harris talked about, this is something that I've had to deal with my own family, having long-term health care aides, and we didn't know how to navigate the system. I literally had to move. I was working in Milwaukee, actually working on this book. When my grandmother got a stroke, I had to go back home to Atlanta to help our family navigate that because they kicked her out. Right. So these are immediate things that are harming us. And it will require a systematic approach. So there have to be more candidates willing to take on the pharmaceutical industry, willing to take on the health insurance industry, and we have to be comfortable voting for them,
right.
And being able to say, we are going to withhold our vote if you cannot address this very basic, fundamental thing that all of us need, that all of us would benefit from. You elected officials who probably have really good health care, and our tax-paying dollars, our public dollars pay for it. You cannot rely on us to get you in office to then throw us under the bus. So I do think there has to be more demands on our public officials because they are supposed to work for the public. Mm-hmm. And then there are more, I guess, personal things that you can do. There is a group that I've interviewed through some of my reporting called the Debt Collective. And so they have helped go to presidential administrations, specifically the Biden administration, to help cancel debt across the board. And they have been working towards medical debt. So they have fought for thousands of people to erase their medical debt. If you look at some news of some hospitals lately, or some insurance companies, they're also in the process of canceling people's medical debt. So there has to be pressure on politicians and these insurers to do the right thing.
Yeah. I think, you raise this connection between elected officials, those candidates who are trying to run for office, and just, we're obviously still dealing with, grappling with the implications of last month's presidential election outcome, and the fact that elections really do matter, right? And, perhaps, I don't know, right? I mean, perhaps, some of the folks who either, showed up to vote for the Trump administration or folks who decided to stay home, like, it will be made clear to them. Because one thing that we know that we're not going to get from this incoming administration is any kind of oversight of the healthcare industry. Certainly not any kind of regulatory, right, oversight. In fact, the entire proposition, right, is to dismantle handle the oversight, the administrative state to reduce regulation. And so, we're not going to see any sort of, big shifts, at least for the people, right, in this next administration. I think that it's, even before, right, the recent events, right, we know that Americans have been quite skeptical toward our healthcare industry. I'll go back to, I talked about some Gallup poll findings earlier in the show, but the recent Gallup poll found that 62% of American adults believe the government should be responsible for ensuring health coverage. This is actually the highest percentage in more than a decade that say that. And you've written about this, I think. So what, how should we help people understand what the role our government should play in terms of healthcare? Because some of this is about public education, right? And sort of winning people over to a position.
Yeah. I mean, I think elected officials have to use their pulpit more. They've got social media. Find out where people are. A lot of people aren't even getting used, especially young people who want to be politically active, or they aren't feeling inspired enough to necessarily be politically active, to I guess, express their political ideology and activity through voting. They might find other ways to do it. But go to where they are. We need more campaigns around it. I think what has happened, because Trump is such a commanding figure in the media, folks get so distracted by conservative talking points that instead of talking about healthcare, it's a reaction to Trumpism. It's a reaction to, well, he's talking about trans people, so we got to denounce trans people. He's talking about DEI. Republicans are talking about DEI, so we need to focus on DEI. Forget what the Republicans are saying. Anybody is left of center and beyond that, they're going to do that to rally their base, to rile their base up. But there are bigger fish to fry here. So instead of trying to, meet them on their own terms and be more conservative, which I think a lot of Democrats are prepared to do, get back to the bread and butter issues that people care about. When I drive around, if I take a Lyft or Uber, I like talking to the drivers and just asking them, their opinion about things. And there have been so many, believe it or not, who want to talk about politics. I don't even necessarily bring up politics, but they might say something. I'll keep asking questions, and they'll tell me we just got to do something about this healthcare. And these are 1099 workers, so they don't get, they don't have insurance that's tied to employment, so they got to come out of pocket, and it's super expensive. People care,
right?
But there has to be a medium, an avenue. I mean, just even with this shooter, you would have thought that no one cared about healthcare just based on the narrative and the messaging this election cycle. But all of a sudden, everyone's talking about it because it's always been there. So there has to be something, I think we can have something short of a public execution in the street to make this a national conversation. We don't have to go to that. We don't have. That should not have to happen in order for us to have a conversation about something that's a human right.
Right. That's exactly right. Okay. When we come forward, I want to talk to you a little bit more about your book and sort of what should we be moving toward in this next period of time. But more with Malaika Jabali when we come forward. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
Tips to help improve basic steps for building a budget in 2024. Building a budget can help you achieve and reach your financial goals. With a budget, you can keep track of your spending, avoid and get out of debt, limit overspending, pay bills on time, and build solid savings habits. What's the best way to get started? Figure out how much to set aside for expenses, like rent, mortgage, bills, groceries, and entertainment. Understanding your past financial habits can help you make the proper adjustments for your budget. Adjusting to a budget can take time as you work to find the right balance, but keep working on it. For more financial health tips, visit chase.com or stop by a local branch. This segment is sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone, and should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
We're not just a thermometer recording and broadcasting popular opinion. We aim to be a thermostat, transforming the conversation about climate justice in our community. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
As a rideshare driver, I love keeping my car smelling fresh and clean. So when I'm driving, I only trust Febreze car vent clips, featuring 3 distinct intensity settings, because it's that little touch that sets me apart. I can turn the intensity down for subtle freshness, or I can turn it up for when I want lots of scent. So whether it's set to low, medium, or high, with Febreze car, I know my car's going to smell amazing. Which keeps my driver rating right where it belongs. Picking up, Oscar!
Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZQuil.
ZQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZQuil nights. Explore our products at ZQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
You don't talk to me like that. Don't talk to your mommy like that.
Unlike your mama, we can handle your black talk on the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire.
Okay, we are back with the Black Pack, and we are talking with journalist and author Malaika Jabali about the broken state of our healthcare system. And Malaika, this is such a great conversation, and you're bringing so much just information and education. I think for me, and I think our listeners as well. That I have 1,000 more questions for you. And not a lot of time. But I do want to, I mean, because you've touched on a lot of things that I think are really important and really playing into this moment, both about like this sort of fear mongering around, socialized healthcare. We have, at least one party on one side who, talks constantly, or at least used to, I don't know if they still do, about fiscal responsibility, but don't seem to care about sort of driving people into debt and, kind of what that means. But, I think, have also touched on the fact that we, have, I think it's been 10 years. Has it been 10 years since the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, passed? Where are we? It's 2024.
Right.
More than that.
About 12 years.
About 12 years. But, there is, and we've seen some changes, right? We talked earlier, too, about sort of places that have expanded Medicaid and, the concerns about what the Trump administration will or won't do to sort of make things better. And we laughed about, his nonsense about, concepts of a plan during the debate with Vice President Harris. He's still talking about concepts of a plan because they really don't have one.
Right.
But it does feel like, the thing that you said last about we shouldn't have to have, public executions in the street in order for people to take seriously and have a conversation about how Americans are struggling with our current healthcare system. What are your thoughts on the will this sort of the recent uproar, this sort of flashpoint that then led to people talking about their challenges and the problems that they're having and real struggles, like real sad stories that people have been sharing. Do you think this will lead to more uproar and sort of calls for more changes or shifts in the system? Do you think that this will is this a moment, or does this have is this an opportunity to actually expand the conversation and sort of force change in the way that you were speaking of before?
Mm-hmm. I think it is up to the American public to decide what they want it to be. It could very easily fall into a moment if there is not sustained action. I think we have microwave level attention spans in the United States where, it's like even in 1 year, it just seems we have lived like 20 different lifetimes.
Right.
So much ends up getting processed in the news, and then we're on to the next cycle. I think that's a function of so many things, including just social media warping our attention span. So we move on very quickly to the next thing. I think it's also a function. I'll get to the detriment first, and then I'll get into, I think, where the possibilities are.
Okay.
I think the other problem is that we have been so engrossed in this individualistic mindset being in the United States. That is our culture, where people tend to just worry about what's happening in their own lives, and also the pressure of a system that makes it harder to think about other things, to organize with other people, to have solidarity because you're stressed out. You are already working so much. Everyone's tired. Right. Who wants to organize? So I think it is going to be up to the American public to say, we are actually sick of this. And instead of having to rely on these lone wolves, I want to be a person working diligently to move something forward. And so there have been organizations, I'm sure through your own work, there are organizations that have not gone anywhere. Labor unions have for Medicare for all, as an example. It could be, we could call it anything that will get people excited. You want to call it the pro-America, super amazing, excellent, whatever it is that can get people to come out where they're not thinking tribalistically, well, my party didn't recommend it, so I can't vote for it, or whatever. Right. There are groups that have been doing that work and trying to unify people around it. So I want to say it's National Nurses United. I believe that's a union of nurses. They have been talking about Medicare for all, from the time before I was writing this book to now. They're still very active. I used to get a lot of text messages from them when they were pushing that to be a major issue during like the 2020 elections. So National Nurses United, they're doing work, as I mentioned before. The Debt Collective is trying to organize debtors and helping people with their debt to be cleared. And then they also ask, I was just looking at one of their surveys, they also ask at the end, do you want to be a part of a movement to end corporate health care? So, it's challenging to want to do that kind of movement work. I just don't see how it happens without mass movement.
Yeah. And I think that there is, you raised something that just in terms of, in institutions that can hold this work, and one of them is absolutely labor. And I think we've seen labor sort of, be big advocates around healthcare issues, but it is also the communities where their members live, right? So their members may have healthcare, decent healthcare through their contracts, but their members also, labor members, union members, live in communities where folks are struggling. And so I think that there's when we think about how we organize or how are we, we can rely on those, or we should be able to rely on those folks who, are a part of institutions or organizations or advocacy groups, right, to sort of help pull in others, because it would be a shame, right, if we lost this moment of intense focus on the problems with our broken healthcare system, and it just sort of slipped away because we got distracted by January 6th, which will be coming up in a few weeks, and then the inauguration, and then suddenly we're on to whatever thousand other distractions that'll be thrown at us from this administration. So I wanted to. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
Well, I was going to say something to that, because I think we know that is what happens with these far right public officials and even media personalities. They find ways to distract people. So we have to anticipate that is what is going to come. They're going to do something. I think because they're corporate, both Democrats and Republicans, they're corporate parties. They have corporate donors. So as much as Donald Trump talks about his populism and they say that he appeals to the common man, he's a billionaire. He has well-off elite billionaire friends. His tax cuts benefit the rich.
Right.
And they don't want it to happen. So I am sure we're going to find something. He's going to find some way to get back into that kind of white identity politics that is his bread and butter. So I think folks just have to be prepared for that. And then just thinking again about more localized ways where this, this debate and these policy measures are being put forth. I was a public policy attorney for several years before I transitioned into journalism. And so I worked for the city of New York. And so we had to look at the state budget on a regular basis. And I worked for city council, so we were looking at the city budget. There is so much that could happen on a city level.
Yes.
People have to figure out what organizations are doing that work to make sure that the budget process meets the needs and the demands of the people. That is a people-oriented budget. That's not one that's going to allocate a gazillion dollars on policing. That's not going to allocate a gazillion dollars to, making sure that there are real estate developments that aren't truly affordable. Where can that money go? Can it go to mental health services? I could go on forever about it, but, state politics are also very crucial here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there are different fronts that we can fight on if we can make sure that we're pulling folks together in the way that you talked about, doing the kind of movement organizing work that will be required. Okay, we have 2 minutes. Any final thoughts as we sort of wrap up this conversation, or any learnings that's important for people to know that you discovered in the process for researching your book?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of us are feeling the brunt of not just the healthcare system, but the way that other capitalist institutions have been crushing our lives. And I cannot envision it when I talk to people in my writing and my reporting, folks who are on the ground and doing this work. They understand historically the importance of movement building. So as you said, to reiterate that point about losing this moment, I think it would be, we don't know when it's going to come around again where there's something that can kind of unify people. Right now, people are mad at CEOs. They're finally, for a moment, they're not talking about trans people in bathrooms. They're not talking about immigrants. They're not talking about Haitians. People are talking about CEOs.
Right.
Right. We don't get that kind of populist energy. So it would absolutely be a waste if we let those older narratives, older than just like a few weeks ago, distract us from what could be. And I believe wholeheartedly that things can change.
Yeah.
The masses of us have to believe and work for it too.
Yeah. Okay, Malaika Jabali, author of It's Not You, It's Capitalism. I want to thank you so much for everything that you brought to this conversation. I appreciate it. I learned a lot, and I really, I hope that, we all sort of hear your clarion call of it's about organizing and not losing this moment. Appreciate you taking the time to join us and talk about this issue. When we come forward, we will take a look at what else is happening post-election. This is KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to the Black Pack. I'm Adrianne Shropshire.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know from BIN News. A report by Black Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul reveals the Joliet Police Department used excessive force and discriminated against minorities. Black Dalton, Illinois Mayor Tiffany Henyard is suing officials after losing the Thornton Township Supervisor Caucus to State Senator Napoleon Harris. She claims her exclusion from the meeting violated township code.